Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Venture Fuel Visionaries podcast. I'm your host, Fred Schonenberg. I am so excited today to have Ronja Stoffregen joining us. She is the Director of Corporate Venturing at REHAU New Ventures. Ronja and I first met a couple years back at an innovation conference, and we were both speaking, and I stayed after my session and was listening. And Ronja used the phrase venture clienting. And I'd never heard that phrase together said that way. And it's all about large organizations working with startups to drive innovation and commercial results. And I was like, that's what I've been doing for 10 years. So I immediately was like, Ronja, we have to talk more. And I'm so excited that I coerced her to join us today to kind of unpack what that is, how it works with CVC and the other ways of, buy, build, partner. A little bit of background just to kind of embarrass you, Ronja. I'll give you some of your highlights here. So she's Director of Corporate Venturing at REHAU New Ventures. She works in deep tech through venture clienting, helping large industrial company partner with startups in a way that drives tangible business impact, both short and long term. She recently transitioned from a 150-year-old state-owned logistics provider to this family-owned industrial company, giving her a very unique perspective on what changes when you shift environments and how innovation programs actually can get built and scale. In this conversation, we're going to dig into a few things: the practical tools she uses, how she spins up lean venture client units with a limited budget and headcount, how she chooses which strategic bet to make, and how she's able to move quickly inside of large organizations. Everything from building 6 pilots within 6 months to figuring out how to make that a repeatable framework. And so we're going to look to what she thinks is possible in the future, how AI is shaping her work, and what large companies can learn from what she is doing. So Ronja, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I was very much looking forward to having another good discussion with you, Fred.
Well, so I would love to get your thoughts. I mentioned venture clienting early on. And so for any leaders that are listening today that don't know what that phrase is, could you maybe introduce it and how it's different from maybe more traditional corporate venture capital or other innovation programs?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, corporate venturing tools, so far I would put them in 3 different boxes. So we have the original venture capital, which was then further developed into corporate venture capital. We have venture building, which had more and more development into venture studios and entrepreneurship and entrepreneur in residence. And, there was a whole new guidelines and principles around venture building. And then we have the third pillar, which is venture clienting. And as the term says it's basically we as a corporate want to become a client of a venture. So ultimately, we don't want to have any equity. We don't want to do a joint venture. We do not. We just want to use their software solutions so that we become a customer and implement it so that we can be at the forefront of technology without having all of the resources in-house.
So why would a large organization do this? How is this different than, let's say, procurement or working with any other customer?
For sure. Sometimes I do say we're like a fancy procurement division, but then we're actually not, because, procurement, ultimately you're intending to decide for one supplier and then you go for it and negotiate the toughest terms to make the best deal for you, right? But I think obviously there's a good reason for continuing doing that. But when you collaborate with startups, and that's why I'm saying collaborating, because we're partnering with them, there's so much things that the startup doesn't know yet from a technical side. We don't know yet from use cases. And oftentimes when the startup is just in their beginner shoes, we don't want to negotiate to the last euro or dollar because we would be afraid so that they would become insolvent if we just negotiate so hard and then we never can finish a pilot. And the most important part is we're not just buying a solution and implement it, we actually try it out first. So what I mean by that is that we do pilots in venture clienting. So if I can just guide you through the process really quickly. Ultimately, we start together with our, REHAU has multiple subgroups and with a focus, obviously. And then we always start with the strategic field. So where and how do we want to save money? Where's the biggest efficiency gains to hold? What is our AI and digital strategy? And then from there, we define pain points. And from those pain points, we define use cases that have potential to be optimized with AI, Gen AI. And then ultimately, we start with the venture clienting unit. We then start with the scouting that follows a long list of startup. We discuss it and evaluate it with our colleagues to have a short list. And out of this short list, we finally then come up with 1 or 2 startups where we actually want to start a pilot. And with this pilot, then we have clear KPIs, and only when those KPIs are clear and set in stone, we are eager to start a pilot, test out the solution, think, does it make sense to continue, or like, does it match our demands from a business perspective? And only then we actually sign those 1 or 2 years contracts. And the difference here is that, in so many organizations, you will have those big software tech bought in, which with lots of customized, lots of like R&D, and then you have like 18 months of a timeline and lots of budgets that never being met, and ultimately you have a product that nobody really wants to use, or let's say just like a small fraction of the people are using it to 100% because so much is still not tailored to their demands. And and this is where we with venture clienting want to close this gap and only invest in startups or in technologies that are relevant for us, that actually meet the demands, and that come usually at a fraction of a cost because it's not so much customized, because it's hopefully a standardized solution.
Very interesting. Is there the value to the larger organization here? I've always found it to be very clear what the value is to the startup. But on the larger company side, some have pushed back over the years to me and said, well, why don't we just wait till the startup has figured it out and become a big enough vendor that we can just send them to procurement? Why are we going to be guinea pigs to whatever the new solution is?
I think that is a fair question, and I think every corporate should evaluate that for their own terms. However, at least for us at REHAU, there are certain use cases where you should, where you just don't want to, you want to catch the train and you want to not miss out on a certain technology. I think it all goes down to the question of make or buy. And surely with a shift of competences, we see that the leading tech people, the leading entrepreneurial minded people are usually not wooing for an entrepreneur, like for a career in a corporate. And so they are outside, they're building those startups, they're building those tech stacks. And so we must get access to those competences and skills and methods. And so we must simply buy the solutions and not make it ourselves. And I think this is where it all comes down to, that I think the time of making everything ourselves in a custom size is done, and we must find ways to implement startups. And if it doesn't work out, then also the costs are not that high, because we can simply just terminate the contract and be done with it, and find something new that is better for us.
I agree 100% with you that the era of sort of we're going to build everything ourselves has passed. I would say that there is, though, some legacy thinking from that era. I called it before, like not invented here syndrome, and it seems prevalent in R&D or engineering groups, right, that are used to building and have a lot of pride in what they have built or how they become a big company, all of which is totally justified. How do you help them get past that hurdle of, hey, all of a sudden you need to think a little different, and there might be solutions out here that could benefit you, by the way. I think it's additive to internal R&D, but I'm curious how you navigate that within the organizations that you've worked.
To be honest, I think there are no good argumentations. The best way to get it done is by showing results. So oftentimes, especially in the beginning, it's hard if you don't have this big portfolio of startups and startups implemented, and where you have all these the track record really inside your organization. But I think especially now in the beginning, like it's been now roughly like a short year, I sometimes, lay low with the discussions and argumentations, because it would just go nowhere. but rather focus on those that are eager to drive change, eager to see the pain points. And I must say, I have a bunch of colleagues, they're really everywhere asking for doing startup scouting or, collaborating with startups. We have more than 70 pain points collected already, and we're doing like 10 scoutings at the moment. We have 6 pilots already started, and 2 solutions implemented at this point. So it is, and I really feel there comes an ease now talking to everybody, because it starts like, after 9 months, the results starts to show. And as we all know, results are bigger than any words. So I'll just stick to that. And then, it's just becoming easier. And I do also want to make this really clear, is you cannot convince everybody. There will always be people who don't want to get it done, who want to have things the way they are. And I also learned, in the first year, that if you must decide, either you want to change or you want to make friends. And I'm really on that side that I always want to have a great environment with great people around me and create impact while having fun. But at the same time, we must change things, and sometimes it's one way or the other.
Could not agree more. So let me ask you this. A lot of the work you're doing is within deep tech, inside of industrial companies. What changes when the technologies and startups you're thinking about are complex, maybe capital intensive, or at the least embedded in physical operations? I think a lot of people go, oh, okay, software, get it. We could try out the thing. If it works, great. If not, we turn it off. Once you get into the industrial side of things, how does all this change?
It changes just from the very first look at it, because all of a sudden, the founding team, the cap table, their financing, everything, becomes a little bit more critical, because you don't want to invest your resources and time and, getting access to a plant if you're not really sure that this is going to work out. So I mean, obviously also the sales cycle takes longer. But I think for me, at least, I find it way more rewarding doing things right at the heart of our operations for REHAU, rather than, right now we're doing also stuff in marketing and legal and, in procurement. And I enjoy this because we have quick wins there. And again, we can show the results. But whenever we get to work with plant managers, with demand forecasts, which is one of the pilots we're doing right now, or with like everything where it's actually around the production, where, oftentimes it comes down to networking capital, where it comes down to enhancing productions. That's where my heart starts to beat, because that's where we really create lasting impact for the organization.
So one of the things we've talked about a few times here is sort of impact or results. And I loved when we were talking about not invented here syndrome, the idea of like, okay, let me go with the people that are excited about this, prove it out, and then bring it back to maybe some of the doubters that are there. I'm curious if you have any examples of moving this from the startup petting zoo, right? The innovation theater idea to some tangible results in venture clienting that you're able to kind of talk to show the impact of this.
I mean, again, as we're just being around not even a year, I don't have, this big portfolio as I used to have at DB Schenker, where we did like 160 pilots, 55 were implemented. However, I'm proudly share that we have 2 implemented solutions that I'm quite eager to talk about. Of course, both are Gen AI. So let me start with the first one. ChatGPT had its go live end of 2023. 2022 was the go live. And so, up until this day, nobody at REHAU had an official license to use the large language model. And so it was also for our CEO, Nils Wagner, who was his grandfather founded REHAU. So, we have the biggest backing we can have here. And he was like, how is this possible? Like, people and our colleagues and our employees, of course, use their private ChatGPTs because, technology is available and people want to leverage on this technology. And so one of the very, very first tasks we did was implement a solution where we not only have access to ChatGPT, but actually to all of the leading large language models. And here we did a perfectly venture clienting method by benchmarking 3 different suppliers. And ultimately, the final selection went to Langdoc, a startup founded in Berlin. And what they do is basically an aggregation platform for the leading large language models. And so we are right now, we did the benchmarking from October till December. We implemented it in January. As of today, we're pre-launch because we still have to, do a little bit of implementations and trainings and what else in the background, but we already have 140 people on the platform who get to use, not only ChatGPT, but the other tools on a daily basis. They can start building agents. And so it's kind of hard to calculate the business case when it comes to, okay, how much more efficient am I when a large language model helps me? But I think it's just sure that we all need this tool. And now it's even gets more excited because the number 1 rule was that we want to mitigate the risk of putting all this, classified data into the tool on a private account. So check mark on this one. And then the other goal is that now we can also build agents, we can build assistants, we can build workflows. So what we do right now is several or unlimited workshops with our colleagues to collect those use cases, what and where is possible to solve with AI. And I think we're going to be busy till, the cows come home, because ultimately it's just going to be a never ending story. Because this is something important here, because also in my previous role in the venture clienting, we didn't have this one Swiss knife that would be able to solve so many problems. But now we have this one tool with which we can do so much automation, from knowledge management to mail automation, to shared inboxes, to ticketing system, to automation in market screening. So there's so much that before would solve one single startup, and now we can all solve it with this one solution. So yeah, I mean, let's touch base again in 6 months or 12 months time, because I'm quite excited about this. And I'm quite eager. Right now we're building an AI academy so that people learn how to prompt, how to know which large language model is best to use when, how to build an agent, where is AI going? Is AI gonna kill my job? All these things that are relevant right now, because I think the most important factor here is that we not just buy the license, but we actually have a high adoption, and that's gonna be the next challenge to be measured at, right? So yeah, you can tell I've been in this topic every day, all day, every day, so I can talk for hours, but it is really important. I think this is especially when we talk about industrial companies like REHAU is now, it was founded in 1948. And, now we're in the AI transformation where we can implement such an amazing tool, which leverages efficiencies, automations, and ultimately cost savings on so many levels. And yeah, it's an exciting time to do it right now.
Is there, it is interesting to see how fast everything is moving on that side. We run Comcast's AI program, and we're year 3, I believe, of just AI for the enterprise, right? And it's different. It's venture clienting essentially, but it's multiple cohorts per year, sourcing business unit challenges, same idea. And it is just amazing how fast the tech is jumping, and the use cases and the solves and the efficiencies. And it'll be interesting to see when AI jumps from efficiency to growth, because that's sort of the promise of the generative part of it, which is starting to come true, which is really cool. I'm curious, one of the things that we've seen and have talked a little bit about on the show is this idea of the pilot to scale up challenge. And I had a client once say, we're the first to pilot and the last to scale. And I always thought that was such an interesting challenge for us to think about, because at the end of the day, you don't just want to run pilots, right? You want it to have meaningful impact to the business. So I'm curious if you have any best practices or operational frameworks, tools that you've used that you've found the most effective in turning pilots into something that has a scaled impact.
Two things quickly. So first of all, you don't want every pilot to be scaled and implemented. That's the exact reason why you do a pilot. So if you would have 100% conversion rate from pilot to scale, then you wouldn't do your venture clienting right, because then obviously then you're just the procurement, then you're just buying in those solutions. But I think my go-to number one rule here is to have clear KPIs before you start the pilot, because obviously whenever the pilot is finished, people are starting to talk about budgets again. This is everybody's favorite topic. And you want to ensure that a pilot was not being done just for the sake of the pilot. I don't want to entertain anybody, especially if even the pilot was sponsored, from our end. So to me, it's most important to have clear KPIs right at the beginning, and then if we meet those KPIs or even exceed them, I think we have from the very day one, we have a clear decision framework, what we do when. I mean, if we don't meet the KPIs, obviously there's no reason to continue. But if we all meet them, the startup is meeting them, then I think it's there's only one way, and then we should, unless there's some seriously budget, cost cutting for whatever reason, then obviously we must reevaluate. But going straight forward, I think it's also only fair for the startup to put in the work. If the KPIs are being met, that we then continue the collaboration.
How do you mentioned launching 6 pilots in 6 months. I'm curious what organizational conditions, or maybe it's decision discipline, allowed you to move that quickly. Because I know a number of folks that have spun up similar initiatives, and it usually takes quite a while to get it going. So I'm just curious how you were able to kind of hit the ground running so quickly, and what made that difference.
I do, credits for credits are due. Nils Wagner was putting this into place at the exact perfect time, because New Ventures, was founded 5 years ago, and initially had a venture capital and venture building scope. And so it was right at the time, similar to, let's just say, how the general market decided on sizing down on venture building, and this also affected New Ventures. And it was right that time that he says, okay, for the last 4 years, we've been more tailing away from the group, trying to do our very own thing. Now we want to move closer to the organization again. And so, ultimately, Nils and I, for 6 months, were in stealth mode, really, to talk to the CEOs, talk to the supervisory boards, and see actually if does it make sense to build a venture client unit. So, when he first asked me to hey, Ronja, should we do this? I said, I don't know. I don't know if you guys are ready for it, if the technological readiness is there, is the cultureness, is the culture there. And so for the first months, we did strategic workshops with the CEOs to understand their strategic fields, and if they're eager to solve some of their pain points with startups. And yeah, we only saw positive feedback and curiosity, and the eagerness to change, and the eagerness to try and adopt new ways of getting things done. And so when we officially launched, then we already had basically done our homework, in the sense that strategic fields were there, and on the very first month we already did the first scoutings. So, and I don't want to say that everything, I think still sometimes, with legal, we did a pain point workshop in November, and just this week we decided to start 2 pilots. And so it still sometimes can take up to 4 or 5 months, from pain point workshops to scoutings to shortlist to reaching out to startups to do pilots. So I think 6 months is very natural here too. But we've been well prepared. Let's just say it this way.
I love it. I'm curious, within the New Ventures framework, and you mentioned this up front, but the venture building, venture capital, and venture clienting, how do you see those working together? Do you, on the venture clienting side, does that become a pipeline to ventures? Because I know a lot of groups that have a CVC and are not thinking about venture clienting. It always kind of surprises me. It feels like they're very complementary.
They are, to me, 100% complementary. And to be honest, especially with venture capital, like getting a bloody nose over the last years, especially corporate venture capital, I see that venture clienting, is early, like it's like short term, low risk, it's just incremental innovation on product and service innovation. However, it's also filling the pipeline for corporate venture capital. Out of those two, out of the startups we're collaborating with, two already had showed interest that they want to talk about investments, and I said, this is great, let's finalize the pilot and then we can talk about, does it make sense for both sides, right? But venture clienting is ultimately the most beautiful operational due diligence, because usually when you only do corporate venture capital, obviously you just look at the tech and the financial due diligence, but you don't ever get to experience the product or the people, or you get to know their working ethics, etc. And so venture clienting is beautiful in that sense, that you actually get to know it. And yeah, if it makes sense for both sides for us to be on the cap table and vice versa, then let's discuss it, right? But we would not just invest and then be like, okay, can we implement it now somewhere in the organization? It would always be number one, the venture clienting, and then potential investments if it's eager for both sides. But then also venture building, that REHAU New Ventures has the capabilities and also the the experience in this. And also we have two, running ventures, LiveLake and Aztec, that are still doing, beautiful in their operations. It's cool that we have this diverse portfolio of ventures, but then also of competences in the team. So yeah, I think we're like, it's our mandate to show what else can be done. And I think, we get to do that. So that's cool.
I love it. I'm curious if you have any advice for another large enterprise that might be listening, that's thinking about this. And, they're obviously always thinking about the next quarter, their results. Why venture capital or venture clienting? And then do you have any like tangible advice for how to get started?
Thank you for the question. To be honest, especially in Europe, I've been talking to lots of board directors who always, give me a ring to exactly answer this question. So happy to do it here on the speakerphone. Ultimately, you implement venture clienting in order to increase efficiencies and save costs. That's the number one intentions with venture clienting. And then, on top of that, it also has all of these other upsides when it comes to collaborating, like cross functions, and building in new softwares that you shouldn't make by yourself. So yeah, this is the number one. And then how do you get started was your other questions. To be honest, like this time also, we didn't buy an innovation operating tool. We just got started. Obviously, we work with Microsoft, as most of the industrial companies, and you can easily get started with defined strategic fields, collect pain points, do a desk research scouting, and then talk to the startups. And yeah, I think especially when you get started, start with the easy ones. Like start with look at your organization and see where and how you can easily have a quick win. Oftentimes those can be found like in sales, customer requests or sales materials, or everything around, where you can enhance the customer experience with just easy twerks. And once you, as you said, hit the ground running and you kind of leverage a little bit weight on your shoulders, then you can start tackling those bigger topics that, some other people have been tried before and maybe was a little bit more tough.
I love it. So I want to do, at the end of the show, we often do something we call rapid fire, which is where I throw a bunch of questions at you really quickly, and you give me your sort of gut instinct reaction in a sentence or so. So are you ready?
Born ready.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay. What is the most common mistake in corporate startup collaborations?
Okay, this was tougher than I thought. The most common mistake is expectation management and communication.
On both sides?
Yep.
Love it. Okay. What's one metric every venture client unit should be tracking?
Number of pain points solved. 2 years ago, I would have said number of pilots or number of money saved, but now I'm talking about number of pain points solved.
Love it. Pilot fast or validate slow?
Well, obviously, pilot fast. That was a trick question.
That was a trick question. What's the biggest hidden blocker to scaling up? You have a successful pilot. What's the blocker that people don't think about for the next step?
The first step is usually data quality. With a beautiful software, and beautiful data, you can do beautiful results, but oftentimes data is not that beautiful. Yep, point.
AI's impact on the industrials out there. Do you think it's hype, or do you think this is a step change?
I think the most critical factor here is to understand which tools actually are, friend or foe. So some of the tools are just a fancy interface, and others truly are embedded with data, and then they truly help us, but others are just a hype.
Yeah. I don't know if I like this question after the Olympics, but who do you think is doing venture clienting better, Europe or the United States?
I love this one because, to be honest, shout out to you guys, because I don't think the US needs venture clienting as much as the Europeans, simply because, the US companies tend to be more open-minded to collaborate with startups, in the first instant. And I feel like in Europe, you sometimes need to have this backing from somebody who helps with the transition. So I know this is over a sentence, but ultimately I think the only help I would give out to private equities and venture capitalists in the US is reach out to the venture clienting teams, because they will help you to position your portfolio firm really well. That's the only thing that I would give out as an advice. But in a company itself, I don't think Americans are resistant to work with startups.
Interesting. If you could change one thing about corporate innovation overnight, what would it be?
It would be the reputation. It is changing, yet you see that because more and more senior people are joining forces in innovation teams, but somehow people still see it as a nice to have and not as a capability that is a must have.
Very interesting. All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to share all your insights with us today. It's been awesome. Is there any last thought you want to leave our audience with? Is there anything we didn't talk about that we should end on here?
There's so much, but I want to shoot back and ask you a question, Fred.
Okay.
From the US perspective, also looking at venture clienting, you said you've been doing this actually all your life. So what do you think has changed over the last, let's just say 3 to 4 years?
Yeah, it feels like all my life, but it's only been like 10 years of this. So I would say what's interesting is early on, most companies, large companies, didn't understand why you would work with a startup. It just seemed very foreign. A few of them got it, and they spun up what accelerators, but very much for the press of doing it. They wanted to seem cool to the market. They wanted to seem cool to their employees, but the idea of it scaling was sort of like, it wasn't core to the business. It was more of a marketing exercise. Those have very much gone out of favor. It is now, can this solve real business challenges? And so I think that's been a big evolution. But I think there is this tension currently of, how do we do this the right way? Is it M&A? Is it corporate venture capital? Is and I don't think the phrase venture clienting is very prevalent in the US, but the idea of running pilots is certainly there. And then there's definitely this feeling of excitement about the idea of venture building until they understand what it is. And then they go, wait a second, no. Like we don't want to give up control. Like we want to do the thing, but we want to use your team to do it. Or they don't understand the venture exit part. They want to be able to acquire it. So I think some of this is just like, there's this strange evolution of, I think more companies are seeing the value of this, but they drifted over into either CVC or corporate building, and are just now starting to realize the value of venture clienting. And so I think that's been an evolution. And now they're going through the challenge of, do we do this ourselves? Do we partner with somebody? What type of staff do we dedicate to it? But I think that's the evolution, is they're feeling out how this can be less of a startup petting zoo and more of a capability for the organization that drives meaningful impact.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I think it's interesting to see it also from your perspective. And then what do you think is going to be the next one? So, we had the wave of, corporate venture capital. We had a wave of venture building and accelerators. I feel everybody's been a mentor, at this point in time. Now we have a wonderful hype in venture clienting. So, what's next?
I think that and I saw some of this language on your website, which made me excited. I think you guys called it co-create with startups. It was a version of venture building. We called it co-development. So very similar, but the idea of taking the best of the startup and combining it with the best of the large organization. So complementary IP coming together for joint development, I think, is a really interesting play, especially if you get closer to the core of the business, where you can take the world-class R&D team you already have and essentially inject them with new thinking and marry those two up to create something really exciting.
All right, so we do another check-in in like 12 months.
Let's do it. Well, thank you so much. This was so much fun, and really appreciate it. And we hope we'll bring you back in 12 months. We'll see what's changed for both of us.
I love that. All right, you all have a good weekend. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.